Speak, the platform where we ask artisans to candidly discuss their work in the arts and also share their opinion on some of the creative industry's biggest issues. My name is Jennifer DiMarco. I'm a novelist, filmmaker, poet, playwright, and core mechanic designer for games. Today I am talking to David Martyn, who is the author of not only the Hall of Faith series, but the Robert Curtis Mysteries. David, thank you so much for joining me today. All right. So, David, the first thing I always like to ask people, and we have your books here. We have, there's been 3 Robert Curtis so far.
Right.
And 3 Hall of Faith.
Right.
Praise Singer is right here, you guys. And then you've also had short stories published in Unconditional, Unnerving 2, and Unnerving 3.
And then we had Hold Up, the little...
Yes, that's right. Oh, David, I'm going to have to make sure when we do our episode of Fair Play that we have that so that you can show it. David has also done a fantastic book with our Blue Flash division. And it's a little pocket-sized book, and I'll make sure to get a copy so we can show that off there as well. Thank you. See, it's interesting because those little Blue Flash editions, they almost act like they're from a completely different publishing house because they literally are just little pocket-sized ones. But that's a really good catch. Oh, that's a good catch. I love that. So beyond the fact that one of your books isn't here, what do you feel is the first thing that people should know about you and your work? Like David Martyn 101.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing about my work is I write from a Christian perspective. Everything Judeo-Christian, I believe. I am a Christian, so that starts and ends with everything that I do and I write. I never expected, never set out to be a writer. I grew up in Chicago, South Side, not the best part of town, but not the worst. Blue collar, and I went off when I was 17 years old to New York. First time I saw the ocean, to a career at sea in the Merchant Marine. Started in the Merchant Marine Academy and went on to Coast Guard, and then spent my whole career with ships. And of course. I enjoyed writing in high school, but once I got off to Kings Point, I say I was trained and not educated, which is probably true. It was great training, but I believe all real education is self-education at any rate.
Yeah.
Because you have to pursue what interests you.
Yeah, you have to be driven.
Right. So, but there is a strong tradition of sea stories in the marine industry. And which always puzzles my wife why I don't write these stories. But it's the Bible narrative has always captured me. Mm-hmm. It's the stories, and they just you stop and think. Jesus, when he came, he did not in his short 3-year ministry, he didn't debate the theologians or the leaders. He told stories to everyday people. Because stories have a way of connecting and a way of being simple to show the truth. So that's what I aim for, just a simple story, a simple narrative to lead you to the truth. And I believe that truth it can be found in the faith in our the historic Christian faith.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I like that idea of, I think it's so important that people, they think that Christ was walking around, that Jesus was walking around and he was just giving sermon after sermon and arguing with the current day church and this kind of thing. It's like, I love that you say, he was telling stories because stories are accessible. They're relatable. They speak to the everyday man. And I also feel so strongly that, he knew the way to capture the hearts and minds of the people he spoke with. Whether a person takes biblical stories at face value or even just as mythology that has built around an event, it doesn't matter. Obviously, something happened, whether it was the the goodness of the people around coming together to feed the masses, or a miracle physically occurred and the masses were fed. Obviously here I'm talking about the fishes and the loaves, as I always joke with the kids, the fishies and the loaves. No matter what the truth is there, that's relatable. That's speaking to a core human need. You know, we all need to eat. We all need to nourish our bodies as well as our hearts, our spirits, our minds. And I love that for you it's about telling stories.
Yeah, it's just telling the simple stories of the truth. I mean, we can. I read somewhere, I don't know if it's true or not, they say men learn through stories. And of course, women are the greatest writers and storytellers, but there's something about that. But it's true. We just like that. So it just boils down to, here, let me tell you a story.
Yes.
And that'll make it clear. And that's how we understand.
Yeah.
That's how we relate. And,
yes.
And that's why the message is timeless. It's universal. People haven't changed. I mean, the Bible stories, the stories of Jesus. My favorite story, and it's one that I used in Unconditional, was the woman at the well. And when I started looking at that, not only is it a fabulous story of dealing with this woman who is, so degraded, but the fact, I got to think about it, Jesus spent 3 days and 2 nights in that village. So it got me to thinking, well, what else did he say?
Yeah.
And what was the impact and what became of her? Well, the church has a tradition, what became of this woman, that she became a great missionary to Africa. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. But the point is, it doesn't matter.
Right.
What the point is, it was the impact that Jesus had on her life was life-changing for her.
Transformative.
And transformative and for the community.
Yes,
So
and
that's
the
what I kept
story
before.
of her experience.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree. In some ways, the individual outcome is less important than the global, the universal, the historical outcome.
Right.
And I think I love that you keep saying relatable, and I think that is really at the core of everything. Is people can say, well, why would I read biblical fiction? I could just read the Bible. And I'm like, you don't really understand. Which I always say very gently, said by someone who has not read the Bible. I mean, the Bible is not meant to be a riveting page turner. It is a religious text. And so some of these stories that you have taken and fleshed out into 200, 300 pages are a chapter, are a verse.
Right. Some
characters are named, and that's it. And you have put yourself in the position again and again and again with your work. Oh, specifically here I'm talking about the Hall of Faith series. Okay, this person is literally just a named character, but what was their life? What would it have been like? What would the impact have been? What would their day have been like? You seem to be able, in an almost magical way, and I felt this from the first time I heard you read, and it was from the Oak of Weeping. That was my first introduction to you. You were giving a public reading with a writers group that you belong to at a cafe, and there had been several writers before you. There were several writers after you. It wasn't like an exclusive David Martyn fancy event, billions of people or whatever it was. But your work was completely captivating because it was relatable. And as someone who has read the Bible, and has read the Bible back to back multiple times, because I grew up a New Testament Christian, and that was part every year. There was I know people know what Sunday school is, but I think they often don't understand that in some denominations, that idea of Sunday school, it's not daycare on Sundays while the grown-ups are listening to the pastor. Even for children, it is Bible study. In our case, it was from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., just like school. So every year we would read the Bible back to back. When we were too young, it was read to us, but nothing was skipped over. And I always value that, at least at the church that I attended, which was West Seattle Christian, nothing was dumbed down.
Right.
Because there are some pretty scary stories, and and the Sunday school teacher would she could do voices, and it wasn't horrific, but I mean, we certainly got an education. And whereas they talk about young people nowadays finding out about the horrors of life, but also the wonders of life, love and romance, and but also murders and war and rape. Oh my gosh, they find out about that kind of stuff on social media. For me, it was my first introduction to all of those things was biblically, and in some ways, I felt it was like, oh, okay, this is part of human nature, the good and the bad, and God loved us no matter what.
And you captured exactly the word when you said relatable, because
Yeah.
that's what I really want to do. Because
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make in all that is the people, the Bible characters. Even when I call that series the Hall of Faith, and when you read the list of the people in the Hall of Faith, and you go back and read about them in Genesis or wherever, or even Peter in the New Testament, the same thing. These were failures. These were people who got it wrong. Far more often they got it right. But what did they do? They took the correction. They got up. They kept trying until they learned. First of all, they learned to trust God. Second of all, they learned they could love God.
Yeah.
And once you can love God, then you can love others, and that's when God can do things in your life. So that's the whole point of the series, the Hall of Faith.
Yeah. I think that, and I personally think with the Hall of Faith, you do achieve that goal. You take stories that are painted in such incredibly broad strokes because they are lifted with love from religious texts, and you make them into fully realized stories that are fully realized with fully realized people. They cease to be characters and really start to feel like people that could step into the room with us, that could have a conversation with us about morals, ethics, life choices, all of that. And I think that is what I really appreciate. But that is not all you do.
No.
So the Robert Curtis mysteries they are fiction.
They're fiction.
But boy, you research the heck out of the historical era and everything surrounding not just the church, but politics, culture, society.
Well, I chose that period deliberately.
Yeah.
And because the time of the 30 Years' War and the Counter-Reformation was a time of also, because I say it was the perfect storm of politics, religion, corruption, and greed, and throw in there was a mini ice age, so there was famine. So you had hunger and war and total displacement, and it was just a terrible time. One historian estimates that half the population of Germany and a quarter of the population of Europe died during that period. So my point of choosing that was we're living in divided times now, and my point was rather than getting caught up in the emotion of today's problems, to take a look back at what happened, what were some of the events in another time when the whole church, all of Europe was divided, politically, religiously, whatever, and the lessons they learned. And perhaps, rather than shouting at each other, there can be some understanding, because we can look back objectively, whereas when we stay in the present, because I have friends on all sides of the political spectrum, and they're dear friends, and I love them very much. But I don't want to get drawn into those debates because they go nowhere. But if you write about it and you read about it and you let people can think and come to their own. Maybe there is a case for reconciliation. Maybe there is a case for coming back together, and maybe we can learn to value and respect and love each other again. So that's that series. Did
you always know that you wanted to do the Hall of Faith and the Robert Curtis mysteries?
No, I didn't know that at all. I mean, I started. I should mention I just started with my first book was The Praise Singer, and that started when after I retired, and I had trouble sleeping, so I'd get up in the middle of the night, and I would read, and a lot of times I'd read the Psalms because there's, just they would speak to me. So I started writing Psalms. And then it occurred to me I would think about some issues, and one I thought about was when Paul says that everything you need to know about God He's revealed in creation. Well, that, you start to unpack that, and that's a pretty heavy thing. So that's where I started to write the idea of, I started with a shepherd who was an orphan, who was totally, no idea who he was or where he was, and he was totally isolated, and it's only through the observations that he comes to realize there has to be a God. And then he goes out on this road. So when I finished the first story, which is he goes to find, and he finds Melchizedek, because there's a key to all three. He appears in all three of the books. And I finished that. It was what was going to be a short story, ended up around 60 or 70 pages, and I'm waiting for my wife to go. We're going off to Easter services. This was about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And while I'm waiting, I said, that's not the end. That's just the beginning of the story. What happened then?
Yeah.
And that led to the rest of the book, which is a very structured book. It's a journey book, and it's very. And I even lay the structure out for you so you can think about it in 4 parts. And as I was getting near that, then I got the idea of doing, well, what's a case study rather than having my manufactured, fictional characters, just interact a little bit with Melchizedek and Shem and Terah and Abraham. What about taking a look at the patriarchs?
Yeah.
And so that was the second book, The Yoke of Weeping, which was kind of the case study of what I was trying to lay out as a journey here. What did it look like in the case of the patriarchs?
So 4 years ago, you were working on The Praise Singer.
Right.
So is that, which, and I love that it started as a short story and became a novel, and I love that you were like, that's not the end of the story. That I love. That was your first, was that your... That
was my first book.
And is that when you began writing, or had you been...
No, well, let's see, I wrote one... I wrote a poem in high school that was published nationally, and I wrote
there we go.
And I wrote during when I was at Kings Point. Our entire sophomore year we spent at sea because we had to have a year at sea in order to sit for our license exam. So they just pile us up with books, and a lot of them reading too. And of course at sea, besides my professional studies, I would read and read and read. And I wrote a fictional story there that was published when I got back, in the school magazine. But I forgot about that. So it wasn't really until after I retired that I really sat down and started writing again. And I'm the type of person who is at a loss for words. I don't think on my feet when I'm trying to carry on a conversation. But as soon as I sit down and put a pen to hand, the thoughts begin to organize, and I can put them down on paper, and I can write clear what I can't speak clear. I don't know. So at least that's what I found. So that's and I was probably about halfway finishing that story when I got the idea of the historical fiction, the Robert Curtis series, because I wanted to be able to give a similar message that in a less overtly Christian way, but still be Christian. So, and that's why Called into Service is my 2 heroes are priests, and the other people involved are also they're all from different denominations. I have an Anglican, a Catholic, and I got a Calvinist, and I talk about Lutherans, and because all the people were butting heads in that time. So I just wanted to. So that's of that series. That is by far the most religious, because looks at the religious underpinnings of the 30 Years' War, and then I look at some of the other things too.
Well, and I think that even though I don't feel like I'm articulating it very well, I think that what I loved about Called into Service is it did kind of open us up, those of us that don't know that era very well. I felt like in Hall of Faith, I was like, these stories are, or at least the core of these stories are familiar to me. I was not familiar historically with the Robert Curtis's era. And so, like when you're talking about, or like as I'm saying, the cultural, the societal, the religious, the political, I think with Called into Service, you kind of gave us what we needed to set the stage to move forward. Even though I feel that the books can be enjoyed on their own, I would recommend that people read them chronologically.
Yeah, they should be.
Because I think you really do build, and I think
Right.
really good mystery series, you come to care about, well, Robert, I mean, you
Yeah.
come to care so much more book to book to book because you've been on those journeys with him. I have to circle back, David.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's my bad. I've been very much looking forward to this. I have to say, when you were giving kind of like the David Martyn 101, you said, Jennifer, I'm just telling simple stories. And when I heard you read the first time, I think the last word I would have used to describe your work is simple. Lyrical, rich or lush in a good way, rich and lush in a way that very full in terms of the sensory experience. You didn't just say, this was the day. You say, the day, it felt like this, it sounded like this, these were the colors, these were the emotions. I felt like I was standing in an olive grove. I felt like I was hearing the sounds of the countryside. It was so amazingly realized and not hurried. And I think even among the authors that I have worked with, authors that I've worked with one-on-one even, authors even that have asked me to guide them through the editorial process, I have never seen someone be so unhurried to just say, God is in the details. And so I have to tie that to what you just said a moment ago, that everything we need to know about God, just look to creation. It's so obvious, especially in the Hall of Faith, but also in the Robert Curtis, that nature, the creation, is a character.
Oh, absolutely.
The environment, the weather, everything. And is that something that you do consciously? Is it something that just comes to you naturally?
Well, I work at that.
Okay. Hey.
To be honest, when I did my first draft and the first, what was part one of the Praise Singer, I let my pastor take a look at it, and his advice to me is, I read it, and then he said, take a course in writing.
Oh my gosh!
So I did, and I don't think it was, but I did. I do struggle. I work hard to bring all of the senses into the description, and I am a strong believer in writers help each other, and I've always been in writers groups, and I listen to the critiques, and I trust the ears of others as well. But no, I do work on that. I took a couple of courses, and what happened, I went to Tacoma Community College, during the day, and all the other retired folks took a writing class, and the class became my first writers group.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it's something. It's like everything else. You gotta sharpen the tools.
Oh yes, no, I love it. Anytime a writer says to me, "No, I work at that," I would much rather hear that than, "Oh yeah, that's the thing I do." I'm like, oh no. Well, then if it's just a thing you do, it could also be just a thing you don't do. But I think if someone is focused and dedicated to including those kinds of, I don't want to call them details, because to me it's the authenticity.
Well, when we're walking through the world, all those things, we know this. We listen, we hear, we smell, we see. I mean,
yes.
Of course. So if we're going to walk through a story, those things should be happening.
I agree. It was a rainy day. No. Give me more. If you're out walking and you're saying it's a rainy day, what does the road look like? What do the leaves look like? They look different when they're wet or when they're dry. What do the cars sound like as they pass you? The rubber wheels on the asphalt. I love those kinds of details.
Yeah.
Okay, so we like to get artisans' opinions on some of the really big issues in the creative industry. And we just like to see the way different people weigh in, because personally, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just, What is your perspective on this? So you have, I'm sure, heard the phrase, or heard the war, the dilemma, that online bookstores are putting bricks and mortar bookstores out of business. And I use the phrase bricks and mortar bookstores as opposed to real world bookstores because it's all the real world.
Exactly.
And I often say, but aren't online bookstores just the evolution of selling books? But how do you see it? And perhaps on a more personal level, where do you buy a book when you want to read something?
Well, that's a good question. If ever there was a natural affinity, it should be with the local bookstore and the author, the local author. It's a win-win for both. It should be there. But I have to tell you, after I finished and put out Brazinger, I went to Christian bookstores and I talked to them, and there was, if I could say the word zero interest, that would probably be an exaggeration. They were interested in what came out from the big publishing houses and the bestsellers, and that was it. I mean, they just didn't. They've been, I caught them as they were closing and downsizing, and not to be harsh, but I got the impression that if you looked around the shop, there were more mugs and trinkets and gifts, and there were books on the shelves, and virtually no fiction. Christian fiction is pretty much a dying art. So I was quite disappointed. I will say there is a model that I've seen and I'm jealous of, and I've been. If you ever been, I'm sure you're aware. You go up to Port Washington and there's a marvelous bookstore up there, and it's a hub. It's a meeting place for the local writers. All the writers group, they meet in the bookstore. They have readings there regularly. The staff there, they know their authors, and they can point their clients to the local authors, and you can develop relationships because it's a wonderful model. It amazes me that
Community center meets.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Creative community center meets bookstore. Yeah.
And as for online sales, I have very, very few. Of course, and I'm not much for online marketing. I'll be perfectly frank, I'm not very good at it. But what I found is just, it amazes me that I can sit in a barbecue restaurant for a couple hours a night, 3 hours a night maybe for 1 week a month, and sell hundreds of books.
Right.
Just by chatting to people as they leave, getting up from their meal, about books and local authors and what do you like to read, and just developing a little rapport. And because people, I have found, like to read lots of different things. Yeah. And they're open. Yeah. They're open. So unless they're directed, they're not gonna ask. And it's the same with other public events. So no, for me, I have to get out there into the marketplace and meet people, engage people, and be open. You have to listen to what it is. I mean, you can't get someone. I have to know my other authors, which I do, and I direct people to other to genres that I don't write.
Right. Sure.
And and I don't feel any loss at that at all, because there is no. I see there's no competition between authors and writers.
Right.
We're all in this, and there's no limit to what the public will read. So
writers help writers.
Writers help writers,
and
hopefully bookstores can do a little more. I'm starting. There is a new bookstore in our town, and I've been in to talk to them, and hopefully get my books on that shelf as well.
I have heard it argued to me when I will walk into a bookstore to meet with either a manager or their acquisitions buyer or something like that. And they'll say, Jennifer, it's the online bookstores. They squeeze us so much. They've taken so much of our business that we can only order in, 100% returnable, absolute top 10 bestsellers of some major regional list somewhere, because, we have limited space. And I listened for the longest time, and I'm like, all right, well, that's valid. And, our next question, David, I wanted you to weigh in on, there are 600,000, a little bit more than 500,000 books published, either self-published or through a press, corporate or independent, in America, every year. 600,000 books. How do you distinguish yourself from 600,000 books? But one, I think that you've answered that beautifully already, though I will let you say more. But I think the thing that I started to think was, oh, okay, yeah, 600,000 books. No wonder, it's so hard to get books onto a shelf in a bookstore. And then, you hear about the corporate and the chain stores. Publishers will buy shelf space to get the books on there. And, 100% returnable, but, someone is paying for the books to get to the bookstore, go back to the distributor, then be returned to the publisher if they're damaged from all of this transportation. If they're all scuffed up, they get pulled off the market, and then they're remaindered, and that's when we see them at the dollar stores. But then I stopped believing, and I started giving bookstores a little bit more pushback, because I think I can as a publisher. I can't as if I'm walking in as an author, of course. You don't want to question the way someone does business as an author. And I started saying, all right, I understand, but if I'm a local publisher and I would give you free of charge 10 of our authors' books, just to see if the traffic that you have here, the audience that you have here would like them. You keep all that revenue. Now, 10 books, trade paperbacks, as you well know, selling anywhere from $12.99 to $19.99. That's quite the gift to just hand a bookstore. And I would walk in and I would say, I've looked at your bookstore, you have all these genres, would you take this package? And sometimes the answer is no. And that's when I started to think, no, this is something different.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so thrilled to hear about bookstores that are that bookstore community center writers group mix, because I feel like those are true bookstores. Those are the ones that writers like you and I like to walk into as readers to buy a book. We feel like they want to know their local authors. They want to hear our stories. They are part of the community. They're not just, let's start a business. Let's have it be a bookstore. And there's more trinkets and toys. I'm not against toys. I'm certainly not against educational toys. But when I walk into any Barnes & Noble right now, and more than 60% of the shelving space literally is blank journals, calendars, Lego sets, Harry Potter dolls, kind of like, where does that come from? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, this is anything but books. And yet I can't even find classic children's books, that I'm trying to get for someone's baby shower or something like this on the shelves, let alone a new children's book published by an independent author. So talk to me a little bit about the massiveness of the publishing industry, those 600,000 books.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
I went to the Northwest Christian Writers Association convention, and talked to. They had agents, and I had agents reviewed my work, and I had actually interest by a couple of the agents in a couple of my stories, but since I had already spoken to you,
Yeah.
I was much happier. But what I learned was so upsetting, at least from the point of view of Christian writing, in that one of the first things I learned is that they would say they're not looking for books, they're looking for authors, and they're looking for one author per genre. And if they've got somebody writing your genre, unless he's near retirement or they're unhappy with him, they're just not going to look for someone new. And then basically he said, now compound that with the fact that you're writing fiction. Because Christian bookstores don't like fiction right now. They like the self-help books from the mega church preachers, basically, or romance, and Christian romance. And to me, I said, the idea of, now when I was growing up, there were some really great biblical fiction books out there, some really, really wonderful stuff that I read as a kid, and that, it kind of got me back. And then I read a book by Larry Christensen, who was a finance guy, who opened up. He wrote a story on Hosea, that he was the prophet who was told to marry Gomer, who was the prostitute. One of the strangest stories in the Bible, but he made it come alive so real, without sparing any of the details. That got me saying that's biblical fiction.
Yeah.
So I was basically, and I did take a class for a successful biblical fiction writer, and what he told me is he doesn't even approach the Christian houses because they're not interested, and he goes to his is published through St. Martin's in London, but so I kind of learned right away that okay, well, so that's not it. Now there's nothing wrong with the genre.
No.
There's something wrong with the industry because all of the Christian publishers are all owned now by the major houses anyway. And so
I was going to interject that.
Yeah. And then the Christian magazines are, I got to be careful with how I say that.
Sure.
But the business alignment is so close that they review the books that are advertised by the major houses in their magazine.
Right.
And you can't even get an independent book reviewed, let alone fiction. I mean, if you open up any of the Christian magazines, there's never fiction.
No, rarely. Very rarely.
Yeah. So it's you have to do it. Now I believe the market is still there, and you do it through I look for book clubs and Bible groups and youth groups and things like that.
Yeah.
But just like I say, it's amazing how many people when they will see the cover, especially on the praise singer, and they will pretty much recognize, that's probably religious. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
And so that's where we go.
Now, in addition to Hall of Faith and Robert Curtis, I mentioned that you have some short stories also published. And I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I have to point this out. Now, Unconditional is a pretty mainstream anthology. It's 10 stories of enduring love, and that word is used both as to endure it and also that it endures.
Right.
And we can come to that in a minute. I would love to hear your thoughts about how you came about thinking about that story. But with Unnerving 2 and 3, that's an annual volume. Those are horrific. I mean, the stories are meant to be unsettling, and they're actually meant to be read once a month. Each one is written by a different author. Then there's a 13th, like an unlucky extra. I will say, and I'm going to give kudos to your editor, Brianne, the senior editor at Blue Forge Press, who said, I'm going to ask David Martyn to write for Unnerving, starting with volume 2, and then she asked you again for volume 3, which was truly invitation only. And I love that you said yes, because jumping back, I certainly know from being a kiddo, there are some scary stories in the Bible. Did you write about biblical stories in the Unnervings, or did you come up with something? Yeah,
they're biblical stories, of course, because there's a lot. Let's face it, God is holy and righteous, and there's judgment, there's accountability for people and their actions, and the Bible is filled with some pretty anything, and because guess what, we're dealing with people, and people were no different then than they are now. So we're fallen sinful creatures who do terrible things, and there's nothing new about that. But my stories, for instance, in The Witch of Endor, I probably go a little bit far because I also, as a believer, believe that no one is beyond redemption. No one is beyond redemption. Yeah. So in my story, The Witch of Endor finds redemption, but she's dealing with evil and dealing with her relationship with King Saul. So and in the other story, it was a more contemporary story, but it takes them back to it's someone undergoing surgery, and it's the after. If something goes wrong in the surgery, and it goes not one but two progressively stronger parables of Jesus, again dealing with accountability, and which I have to say, every time I go through a surgery, when they put me under, you always wonder, am I going to come out?
Right.
So those are unnerving. So yeah.
Yes.
But my point is, and to be honest, I was more worried about some of, having my stories in, whether or not they mix or are people going to be upset that I'm putting my stories in with those. And my attitude is, Jesus went to everybody. He talked to anyone.
Oh,
so I will put
absolutely.
my book. I will put my story. I will put my story there and let it stand. And I'm willing to bet there are people who read me and those that would never pick up my novels.
And that's what I love.
Yeah.
That's what I love. Now, I remember 20 years ago, times have certainly changed, but 20 years ago, we would put out a book, and if it had, let's say, a gay character, we would inevitably get like an Amazon reviewer that would be very scathing and say, oh, they're trying to push their lifestyle. And I'm like, no, this book is primarily written for gay readers. Just don't read, just don't buy it. Why did you buy it? It was so obvious from the description. This wasn't a hidden fact.
Yeah.
What I love is that people will say, oh, those, and I've seen this in comments as well. This is so Christian. Don't try to recruit me. I don't be recruited by some Christians. And I'm like, okay. The Christian religion is based, part of its foundation is to spread the word. These Christians are just being true to their religion.
Right.
Okay? If you don't like it, just say, so fascinating, what a great story, and move on.
Yep.
Or, as it even says in the Unnervings, if there's a story that is too much for you, ultimately you as the reader have to curate what you read, have to moderate what you read.
Right.
Just skip the story.
Yep.
Keep scrolling, as they say on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, stop and think.
Absolutely.
God sent a holy man, his prophet, to marry a prostitute.
Yeah.
To have children, have her run out and be unfaithful to him, just as a object lesson of people being unfaithful to God.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't tell you, what how God sees it,
Yeah.
who are we to judge?
Absolutely. And what about unconditional?
Unconditional. I just love that story.
And that was your idea. You pitched the anthology idea,
right?
To
Because when you
Press.
asked me to write that, and I said, well, I like because there's always a lesson of hope and a lesson of love in all my stories.
Yes.
And I said, well, I will stretch and write unnerving if you will go and do something with love. So,
The bargaining at the Great Crossroads.
And here's the thing. The Bible is a love story, God's love story, and there's some key things through it, all through of it. And one of the things that is one of the reminders when you're dealing with a love story is a well, because in all the Bible stories, the great love matches are made at a well, where Abraham meets each of the patriarchs. They meet their wives at the well, and even Rebecca, she was at the well when the servant from Abraham came and found her. So the well is always a kind of a thing. Well, when you stop and think about it, that's where they mixed. So when Jesus met the woman at the well, that was the Bible's way of telling you, listen up, people, this is a love story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, it's such a powerful story to me because it's just a reminder that no one is beyond redemption. And he took a woman who was, had 5 husbands, and this one wasn't even a husband, and she couldn't even go out during the day. She was so slammed and ridiculed, and yet Jesus took the time and loved her. And not only that, he bore all of the comments, the remarks, and the concerns of all. He didn't care what other people thought. You know,
Right.
He just did it.
Yeah.
And showed it. And so it's just such a story, and to see the transformation in her and the transformation of the people. So, and it was so intentional.
Well, he was revolutionary.
Yeah.
I mean, he honestly was.
Yeah.
I think that's what appealed to me as a little child, especially.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this wasn't a button down, and nor was the youth pastor at West Seattle Christian. I will say, you know, Alan Gardner, who was actually Alan, who then became the congregational pastor, who was actually the pastor who baptized me, actually. But he was the youth pastor when I was a child. And he would dress up and then speak as Moses. You know, he would tell this, you know, or just things like that to really engage people, to really, and not just the kids, but the adults too. And I think that because of Alan, I always saw Christ like that. He was going to do whatever it took to engage the people, and he didn't care what other people were saying.
And he was never judgmental.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, we have such a divided society today, and that's what breaks my heart. And but
Kind of sometimes feels like to me, David, like we're going through another mini ice age, but of a
Right.
different kind.
Yeah.
It's amazing the cold shoulder
Yeah.
that so many of us are giving each other out in the world. So to kind of close up our speak interview today, I have to ask you, what is the biblical story that you haven't yet written about that is your your absolute dream?
Well, you know, the one that's always, I love the story of David. And I love the story not only of Jonathan, but there's another story in the Bible called Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was Saul's son. And after Saul and his brothers died, and Saul's nephews were finally, who tried to revolt against David, they were all put to death. David asked the question, is anybody left that I can honor my friend? And of course, Mephibosheth was not Saul's son, Jonathan's son.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
His story, it's the perfect line, because he runs off. And in fact, he was a young boy when they kind of rushed him away because they were afraid David, like every king, would kill everybody in the house, the prior royal house.
Right.
So he runs off to the deep Sinai, and as they're throwing this young boy onto the donkey or camel, whichever, he falls and breaks his leg, and he's lame for the rest of his life. But when David finally finds him, his comment was, "What does he want with a dead dog like me?" And of course, what he wanted was to bring him back and bring him into honor. That whole relationship of because there are so many good people in the Bible who did not come out on top. Jonathan, Caleb. I mean,
Yes.
there's so many. Those are the stories I like to tell because they're every bit as important, as loving, and as victorious. As Jonathan was every bit as victorious as David. But he knew that it was David that was going to be, not him.
Yeah.
And that friendship. No, I'm sure my only hesitation is a story is it too well known? Is it too well known? I don't know. But that whole story of Mephibosheth.
I don't think that it's been overdone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is. I mean, it is known. But I mean, the story of Isaac, Rebecca, and Deborah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that's a very well-known story.
Yeah.
But what you did in the Oak of Weeping, I would hate to have you said, "Oh no, people have done this." No, I think that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
with Mephibosheth, I always thought, what would he want with a dead dog like me?
That's a great.
Because we've all been in a place where we just feel like a dead dog.
Absolutely.
We're down and out, and
We're beyond usefulness.
Yeah, right.
Yes. I feel that way sometimes at the end of a work week. I am now beyond usefulness.
Yeah.
But that, I think, I wish that for you, David.
Yeah.
I think that would be an incredible story.
Holder was one I wanted to do, but again, it was good that you came out with that because I didn't think I could stretch that out into a full novel.
And again, you guys are going to have to check out David and I. We're going to talk for Fair Play, and we will have Hulda with us. What is wonderful, and David, I'll extend our interview a little bit here. These little pocket-sized books, they're just like 4 by 6 inches, tiny, about 10,000, 15,000 words, somewhere around there. And what I love that you said you were going to do, David, is you were going to get a whole bunch of them and just kind of give them out. I know they retail for like $6 or $5, something like that, but you were just going to hand them out and be like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I do give a lot of them away.
So when you say, you do use them. It's like, this is the gateway to Hall of Faith, to Robert, to everything, really. And I love that idea. It's like, it's just a little taste, but it's a fully realized story, and it's a beautiful story. Would you ever consider, would you want to expand?
Yeah, I will do one of I'm right now. I'm about a third of a way through book 4 in the Robert Curtis series. I'm tentatively calling that Forgotten King, the Deadly Pamphleteer, but it really looks at the question of, it's now where Charles is king, and he was such a tyrant, and they're dealing with how far do you go with a tyrant? What's the breaking point now? And of course we know that Parliament did basically rebel against Charles and led to the English Civil War.
Yeah.
But there were good people on both, and how long do you stay with a tyrant? And because that's a question we all have.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's I'm finishing that book. But when I finish that, I would like to write some more of the Flash, and because there's so many minor characters in the Bible who are really important, and I'd like to just give their stories.
Yeah, that may not have like a novel length.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider doing, I think the Flashes work great because, again, they are that small little bit where we talk about instantly accessible. You can pick them up during your lunch break or whatever like this. But I can also imagine them, after you've done a few of them, compiled together into a collection of shorts.
I would love to put a collection of my short stories and my short little novels together.
Absolutely.
So that's it's something because I take a lot of pride, because man, those stories are every bit. In a lot of ways, they're more emotional for me because I can just concentrate so much, because it's so compact, it's so concentrated.
Yeah.
That to me, I find them powerful because I don't have all the subplots and sub-stories and all the other things, historical and all the other things that are wonderful to know, but without the emotional impact of the short stories.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is. They're like concentrate.
Right.
Yeah. So to end our speaking interview today, you have a page that you would like to read for us.
Sure.
Now, this is something that we do with all of our artisans, and basically the idea is so many people will walk into a bricks and mortar bookstore and they will flip through a book to kind of try to get a feel for it. Is it written in first person? What's the author's style, to see if they like it? And even online, we have seen the feature at Amazon itself, the look inside the book.
Yeah.
So we asked artisans to read a page. Now, I know that you said you wanted to read like a paragraph.
Yeah.
And then another little paragraph from another page.
Right.
Okay.
And let me give you, this is from The Praise Singer, and my hero he was an orphan and a slave. He has no idea who he is, where he came from, only that he has been abused. He by observing creation, he realizes there must be a God, and when he heard the story of Noah and the sign of the rainbow, he runs away to find. Noah is past, but Shem was still alive, and so he runs off to find Shem. And he finally does. He is brought before Shem, and he just asks this ancient man about the voice of God.
Okay.
And so Shem had stopped. I asked, God spoke to you? The Most High God speaks to men? Our Creator can be heard? It must be glory. What is the voice of God like? Does he speak often? Is there hope that he may hear my prayers? Will he? JL, the voice of God was unlike any voice I have ever heard. Yet it was clear and unmistakable, at once terrifying and comforting. God gives us his word to whom he wills, when he wills. But be assured, God hears you. Now, JL, Tara tells me that you are on your way to Salem to find me. You must continue your journey, for there is more you are to learn. Come close to me now. Yes, young man, you are as rangy and as scruffy as a mountain goat. But the Lord, the Most High God, has this to say to you. I know your name. I attended your birth. I know your father and your father's fathers to the end of generations. I know your mother and your mother's mothers to the ends of generations. I raised you to be a shepherd. I have reserved a name for you if you continue to seek me and obey the commands I have for you. JL gets a gift. The name of the book is The Praise Singer. And his gift, of course, is praising God. And it just gave me an opportunity to write psalms. And I'll read one of the psalms. There's probably 30 psalms in here, all original. Walk with me, O God, my Father. Walk beside me every day of my life. Laugh with me as a young child chasing the spring lamb. Instruct me as I learn to shepherd the flock. Encourage me as I hone every new skill. Walk alongside me and tell me the mysteries of the night sky. Smile with me as I behold the wonders of your creation. Lead us when I walk with our friends. Walk with me and I can bear any burden. Walk with me when I face danger. Squeeze my hand when the darkness hides your face. Let me know that you are always with me. Sit beside me when I am old and cannot walk. Whisper your wisdom in my ear. Do not let me miss any hidden mercy. Tell me of every transgression and show me the path of obedience. How I love to listen to your voice singing over me. Walk beside me and listen to my love song to you. Walk beside me, O my Father, that I would always delight in your will. Walk with me, my saving God, this day and forever.
David, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I am so incredibly honored to work with you and to be part of the team that brings these books to life. And we are never going to give up. We are going to change this industry. And I do truly believe that. And I've seen independent bookstores and independent publishers make breakthroughs and changes before. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Thank you so much. This is David Martyn, everyone, and his books are Called into Service, Lords and Ladies, Soldiers of the King. Those are the Robert Curtis mysteries. As David said, there's another one coming out very soon. He is working on it. The Hall of Faith books, The Oak of Weeping, The Epistle. Am I saying that right, David? The Epistle?
Yep.
The Epistle, The Praise Singer, and also Huldah.
Right.
Huldah?
Huldah and the Last Righteous King.
Thank you. Huldah and the Last Righteous King. Check out my conversation with David at Fair Play to see Huldah, and then also you can find David's short works in Unconditional 10 Stories of Enduring Love, Unnerving 2 and Unnerving 3. All of David's work is Christian fiction in the best possible way, and it's definitely worth a read. Cultures all over the world have fascinating religious texts that their believers find, if not just canonical, they consider them historical truths. No matter what your personal beliefs, whether you think that biblical stories are fact or fiction or somewhere in between, you can't deny that these stories are incredibly instructive and full of the large questions that we face as human beings. Published by an inclusive, independent publishing house, David Martyn is proof that Christian should not be synonymous with bigot or close-minded. David provides readers of all denominations, or no denomination at all, with an entry point to these incredible biblical stories, to a tumultuous time in the history of mankind. And by giving us that entry point, he allows us to explore these stories in the thoughtful and thought-provoking ways that biblical stories, that all good stories can hold. So you don't have to be a Christian reader to find value in David's Christian fiction. Thank you for joining us today for Speak. Speak was brought to you by the 501c3 nonprofit Blue Legacy and made possible in part by grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Washington Arts Commission. If you'd like to be interviewed on Speak, or you have a question that you'd like us to ask our future guests, please write to us at blueforgefilms@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
This is Dave Martyn, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of a report on my experience with Speak and Fair Play with Jennifer. And I must say I was very nervous going into the interview because it's hard to be able to expand in a few short sentences all of the emotions and thoughts and the feelings that go into writing novels, which take hundreds of pages to work your way through the message you're trying to give. But first of all, let me say that I think as a interview, I would say it didn't go like that. No, my thought would be Jennifer gave less than an interview and more than a conversation. And oh wow, what a wonderful conversation it was. It was encouraging, it was relaxed, it was thoughtful, and all of my nervousness went away, and I went away finishing the interview thinking that, wow, I've been encouraged. And I just want to say that Jennifer DiMarco is just an amazing woman, and what a wonderful person to have as our publisher. For those of you who are of my age, I would compare the experience more like a Dick Cavett interview. If you ever go back to Dick Cavett way back in the early days of the Night Show, when Dick had a way of listening and discussing and conversing with his guests rather than interviewing or grilling them. Jennifer, way to go. Thanks a lot.